Great. Good morning. Good morning.
Good morning.
Anybody who saw the Muppet Show, raise your hand. And the two of us should remind you two characters of the Muppet Show. Okay, I really have a pleasure to have next to me James Robinson III. For those of you who don't know Mr. Robinson, he had a meteoric career in the business and more than the business scene in the United States and the world over. At the age, what age you were CEO of American Express?
42.
42. No, 42 you were the chairman.
Chairman and CEO.
CEO you were at when you were 40.
That was president.
President, okay, I don't know. President, chairman, CEO for me.
Same job.
Same job, yeah. He was very influential. He was the guardian of the secret formula of Coca-Cola when he was on the board of Coca-Cola, right? And also of Bristol-Myers, on the board of Bristol-Myers. And he really saw the development of the American business from practically from the post-wars at the mid-20th century up to date. And instead of me telling you all the things that he's going to tell you, why I don't give you a chance to talk. So, Jim, can you share with us very quickly how you emerge on the business scene of United States?
Just lucky.
Yeah, okay, but still you were born in Georgia, Atlanta.
True.
Right, at what year?
1935, just means I'm old.
1935, then you went to the Navy.
I was Georgia Tech, then the Navy, and then Harvard Business School, then started heading south, got as far as New York City.
South, yeah. And what did you study in Georgia Tech?
I was mechanical engineering and industrial management.
And then you went into finance, though you had some solid, honorable part in your background that you learned engineering. So how you moved from engineering to finance?
Well, you know, I was, I guess, a nerd in college. I loved calculus. Not because I could solve equations, but it taught you about change. First derivatives, second derivatives, is change happening at an increasing rate, a decreasing rate. That's what life is all about, change.
So you went from Georgia Tech to the Navy?
Yes.
From the Navy to Harvard?
Yes.
What did you study in Harvard?
Whatever they ask you to study, and the case method, of course.
Okay, and what kind of students you've been?
I was always able to be in the top quartile, but never at the very top. I didn't want to be conspicuous.
And then you finished Harvard at?
61.
61. I finished high school in 60.
53.
53. And you went to Wall Street.
Yes.
You didn't head back to Atlanta.
No, I still talk about it.
Yeah. You regard yourself today as New Yorker or as Georgia boy?
Damn near Yankee.
Really? That's a kind of betrayal, no?
Well, you know, I can...
What your father said about it?
He hoped I would come back south one day, but he died in 1967.
I see.
He was my best friend, and, you know, life happens.
And so you went to New York, and what was your job in New York?
Well, I started off at Morgan Guaranty Trust Company, and you know, they didn't have a training program. I pushed the little black carts with securities down the hill to the clearinghouse. But then I went through various departments and ended up in my final 2 years there as assistant to the chairman and CEO, Tom Gates. And he had been Secretary of Navy, Secretary of Defense, and had come to Morgan and as a vice chairman, and the CEO, Henry Alexander, died. And so Gates became the chairman, and I was asked to be his assistant, and I said, could I let you know tomorrow morning? I called my father and I said, you know, I've had this interesting offer and I wanted to tell you about it and I'm going to turn it down. He said, you better go have a drink. When are you going to have an opportunity like this to see a big company from the top down, how it works? So I accepted, and it was one of the great pleasures of my life for 2 years because my job description, Gates said, I have no idea what it should be. I just want you to be overinformed. And you go to all the meetings I go to and try to keep me on top of the things I ought to be mindful of. So that was an open ticket to do whatever and to learn a lot and to work for a wonderful individual.
And you've been there until
68.
68.
And I went over to White Weld as a partner, which was one of the boutique investment banks. I was there for 2 years, and then December of 1970 went to American Express as an executive vice president, and then was president in 75 and chairman and CEO in 77, retired in 93, started up my new business with my oldest son and a classmate of his from Harvard Business School, RRE Ventures. And we've 25 years of being an early stage venture technology investor. And that keeps you young.
Yeah. By the way, I have to tell you, when I first encountered one of your business was in 98 in a dinner that I think it was at Esther Dyson. I didn't meet you, but I met your lieutenants when you advised AOL on some issues which they had at that time. So this was quite a long time ago. So you went to American Express, and at that time, now we are going to begin to talk a little bit of change and your perspective on change and the speed of change, which is actually the core of this discussion. What was the technology, what was the products of American Express at that time? American Express actually was kind of a fintech company, as we call it today.
Yes, we had the American Express Traveler Check, and I've got a picture of it, I think. I don't know how many of you have ever used a Traveler Check.
Who have used, oh. Who never heard what is Traveler Check? Raise your hand. Okay.
All right, now that was the original token. Happened to be paper.
Bitcoin.
But it was created in 1891, and it was no, leave it up. It was a simple theory. If we still have, it didn't dissolve, I don't think.
You have one in your pocket. Can you take it out?
I've got a bunch of them in my pocket, just for nostalgia. Because one of the cool things was I had to sign my own currency. And then when you bought it,
you printed your own currency.
And printed too. You would sign it on the top when you bought it, and then you would sign it on the bottom when you cashed it. And it was a simple theory: witness and compare. And we had a sales force going to the banks, tell them that's all you need to do, and to the merchants. And as long as the bottom signature on the left looked reasonably close to the one at the top of the left, that was okay.
And you needed it so your money will not be stolen.
If your money was stolen, you could get it back by calling American Express, and they would get it to you within a matter of hours.
I have to make a confession, you know. So when I began to travel abroad, it was 1971. There was no credit card. We will come to it in a minute. So I used to take banknotes. But I knew that in New York at that time, as you remember, you are being mugged all the time. So my wife sewed for me 2 pouches, which I put the travel checks in the pouches, and I would put them under my underwear, you know. So I was going
that's a hell
as
of a
an
safe
ATM
place.
machine. If you are interested in the technology, I'm willing to license it. Okay, and then all of a sudden, this new plastic, hip, glitzy thing came, which was called?
Well, the American Express card, and we got into the business by acquiring 120,000 names from the American Hotel Motel Association and grew that into the card. And the internal fight between the traveler's check, which was a established stage, successful money cow, and this upstart called
Not
plastic.
upstart, disruptive.
Disruptive upstart. And I had to spend part of my time kind of putting out silly parochial interest to support the card. And of course, the card is what American Express is today. Traveler's checks at their biggest time probably was about $7 billion. And we would charge 1% when you bought it. We wouldn't charge you again, but we kept the money for a long time. You would invest those funds in long-time kind of things, and we invested some in early stage venture and private equity funds because, it would go on forever. And American Express was an interesting company because you had commercial banking, investment banking, travel and tourism industry. We could have conferences and dinners almost as interesting as Yossi has at the DLD. He's the dean of entertainment, the dean of creative networking,
Let's focus on the credit cards.
Well, of course, the credit card business is one of the dynamic change agents in the world. Visa and MasterCard. MasterCard is one of our limited partners in the funds that we raise to invest in early stage companies, and probably about 30% is fintech, and we have the largest footprint in terms of numbers of companies in Bitcoin blockchain of any VC around. Probably $40 million spread over 4 funds. There got to be some ponies in there somewhere. And we
Now
got
you jumped like 50 years forward.
50 years forward. Well, I was, change happens quick in today's world. And to me,
Took him 50 years to have an overnight change.
well, the credit card industry has grown. Visa and MasterCard. And First Data I bought for $85 million in 1980, the largest processor of Visa and MasterCard in the world. Took it public, ultimately sold it to KKR for $26 billion. And they have just, sold it, merged it with Fiserv. KKR will still own about 20-ish% of the company. That was one of the change agents, too, the processing for credit cards. And with all the variations that are coming on now, electronic wallets, tokens, cryptos, and yes, the world will have a cryptocurrency one day. Bitcoin is the lead horse and probably will be a survivor. But the mechanics and our interest has primarily been the blockchain, just like the presentation we heard yesterday from Don. The horsepower of that mathematics, the distributed ledger, no single point of failure, the capacity to have a record in perpetuity of whatever's in it, the confirmation that it is a valid transaction, all of that is changing the world and changing it fast. And to me, that word change is one of the drivers of life because it's interesting to watch the way that people, companies, governments change or don't change. And many of them change too slowly. Look at Nokia, look at BlackBerry. Of course, one of the biggest problems any company has, regardless of size, but particularly the big ones, is fighting the arrogance of success and thinking that you've got the lead position and will always have it, because you won't. Today, it's too easy to be disenfranchised in one way or the other. So that puts a special pressure on the board, on management, on the CEO. How fast do you make change? How do you integrate it with what's going on and protecting what made you a great company, and yet knowing that you've got to change? Jeff Bezos has the right idea. Every day is day one. You need to think that way. You need to think that, okay, Sure, I'm great today, but what do I do tomorrow that's better? And not be afraid of disrupting yourself, because if you don't, somebody will.
Jim, the time is running short very fast. I need to cover with you three things. I'm going to ask you all the three together. Try to cover all of them in the next 4 minutes. Okay? Number one, we are now in the late 70s, or we are back to the late 70s. Two things. One, New York City going bankrupt. City doesn't have money to fix the manholes. Second thing, you are the first American businessman which is moving to do business in China. These are two things. And the last one is, after all this amazing career, what is the few main takeaways that you took from all what you have done and all the mistakes you have done? Three things. 1, 2, 3. Boom.
You want to repeat the questions?
I don't remember them.
I don't either. That's the problem.
New York,
Okay.
China, takeaway.
New York, its economy was based on the financial industry back in the 70s, et cetera. And when that was troubled, we had trouble. David Rockefeller led an organization that ended up being the Partnership for New York City, and I got commissioned to help institutionalize it. We did. We went to Washington, did all those things, and got enough support and interest to turn it around. Now it is a diverse economy, and so it won't have those same kind of problems again. Michael Bloomberg was a great mayor, and I won't say anything about.
Are you going to play with him golf in April?
He will decide in February what he's going to be doing for the rest of the year, and I told him, I hope you will not be able to come to play golf in the end of April. It would be wonderful to see him run for president as a Democrat. He was a Republican because he was a Democrat as well. Second question was
China.
China. I was the first large company American CEO to go to China in 1979. Landed in Beijing. Everything was gray. No trees, no grass. They had a dinner for me, and they about 15 people. The youngest was 75, which I thought was real old then. And they were the only ones they could find that had an idea of a market-oriented economy. And the party had determined central planned economies do not work. Market-oriented economies do. We will bet on that, grow it. If it gets out of hand, we'll thwack them and put them back in line. And that's what they've done. And they've taken 1 million people out of poverty in that 45-year period. We can't take 5,000 people out of poverty in West Virginia. Now, they have the power of eminent domain, and that helps them get a lot of things done. So I'm a big believer in China. And Kai Feng Li, his book on the AI superpower is fascinating. If you haven't read it, please do.
And where do you see China, US, and Europe going?
Okay, China will continue to do its thing. It's got more data than anybody in the world, as pointed out in that book. And data feeds the computers that deal with artificial intelligence. If you don't have a lot of data, you don't have the capacity to have reliable AI. And nobody has more data than China. They have done a remarkable job of changing that economy, and the current trade wars with the United States are appropriate from the standpoint of openness, fairness, intellectual property protection, that sort of thing. And hopefully there'll be some resolutions here in the not-too-distant future. China will be a factor and an important factor for the world. United States will get our act back together. The country is too tied together with voluntarism, with creativity, with the interest in competing and winning, and it's got a big market. Europe, 500 years of the individual country egos, as long as you can keep those down, because the overall objective of a continent that functions is critical. And you got such remarkable history and people that it too will be a success. And as long as you're around, Yossi, I know damn well that you'll get all of those desperate.
Sure. The takeaway. What the one advice you will give all these people? Anybody here is older than 83? Nobody. So to this young crowd, what would you give them one advice?
Have the courage to get involved in the game. It's fun, and it's happening, and it's far better to be in the current and swimming with the fish than on the outside watching it go by.
You know who preceded you saying it in a different words, but the same idea? Teddy Roosevelt in his famous The Man in the Arena.
Yes.
In 1910, said that you should respect the guy in the arena even if he's on the floor, smeared with dust and blood, then the people who are sitting around the arena and not getting into the arena, even to try to win, even if they lose. So, Mr. Robinson, we hope to see you in the arena for many, many more years, and thank you for coming all the way from New York. It's terrific, like always.
Thank you, guys.